is small scale specialty crop practices and farm tools, and this is Caitlyn Powell from TWC. Okay.
Hi, everybody. It's very intimate in here. So welcome.
It's like church, everybody's as far, but
Right. Gives me some room to move around up here. So, anyway, yeah, we're going to talk about small scale specialty crop practices, and we brought some tools that are kind of hidden back here that we'll go over. So, the first part of this will be just me going through a slideshow, kind of showing some things that we've been doing at our farm plot at the Alpine Science Institute just outside of Lander. I'm going to plug a few of our programs and some of our other courses that we have coming up as well. And then at the end, we'll talk about some tools, some small scale farm tools, and we'll show you some of them and kind of show you how they work as well. All of these still have red clay soil on them from having been used up at the ASI outside of Lander.
Still stained red.
Yeah, so they're authentic. All right. Oops. Sorry, this isn't my computer, so I'm not. Oh, I don't know what I did, Joanne. Okay.
can you just?
There we go. Okay. Just by way of introduction, I am Caitlyn. I work with CWC with our beginning farmer training program. And Douglas is here as well. He's going to help us look at some of these tools here in a bit. He is the new assistant farm manager up at the farm plot as well. Joanne's here with us as well. She's the director of the CWC Lander and oversees this whole program. And then Ethan is up here. He's not here with us, but he's the instructor of the program and has been the farm manager as well. So, all right, here's us plugging our program really fast, and then we'll get into some of the nitty-gritty. We do a 5-month comprehensive beginner farmer training program. We started with a 1/4 acre plot at the Alpine Science Institute, and we're expanding that to 1/2 acre this year. And it really takes people through the whole growing season from the beginning, from planting seeds, creating transplants, seedlings, all the way to the end, and all of the harvesting and food cleaning and production in the middle. And there are also a couple of different courses that are involved with that. There's the hands-on practicum portion of it. But then we're also teaching soil science, agroecology, and a farm business class that helps people create a business plan from what they've learned and hopefully be able to go use that out in the community. And then there is also a farm incubator program that allows people who've completed this program to use 1/8 of an acre of farmland up at the Alpine Science Institute to be able to kind of test things out for their new business and start growing and get some real experience under their belt. And just really quick, if you know anybody who's interested in this program, we have full scholarships available for this year, 2022. So it's really a good opportunity for people to come in and take this program basically free of charge. Yeah, and so anyway, spread the word. All right, and then one other thing, CWC also has a community course next week with Ethan, who I talked about previously. It's just kind of planning for crop selection and where to place things and how to order seeds, all of kind of the basics to get you started for the spring season. So that is an online course, and you can access it through Eventbrite. And if anybody is interested and wants to leave me their email address, I'm happy to send you the link so that you could get registered.
And I have a sign-up sheet
Oh, perfect.
we can just pass around.
Yeah,
If you want
super.
more information, our beginning farmer training program, or any of our spring gardening series will provide that information for you.
And there will be 2 other courses after this. You might have to remind me what
Soil
they are.
health and seed starting.
Okay, this is why we're here to talk about specialty crops. Specialty crops, what are they? It sounds like a fancy name, right? Really, it's just Come on in.
There's a chair.
There's a chair back over there and then one right here.
One there we can move.
Yeah.
There's a chair
Oh,
over
this is
there,
back
and
there?
we can pull more chairs out.
Yeah, there's one over here.
Sorry.
All right. Specialty crops are really your fruits, your vegetables, flowers, tree nuts, all of those things. Really anything that's not just grain, fiber. I don't even know what oil field crops means. I took this quote from the USDA, so I put it up there, but I'm not even sure what that means. But it's not those things. So really it's just the growing of produce, virtually. All right. Some of the things to consider in our unique region, we're at high altitude, so we've got a short growing season, and we need to consider season extension possibilities to help us either start things earlier or extend the season on the fall side. We need to consider access to water and irrigation practices as well. And then I'm going to talk a lot about soil health and regenerative agricultural practices, primarily because those are the procedures we've chosen to use at the CWC, and there are a lot of benefits not only to the environment but to the person employing those tactics. And then also things to consider if you're considering doing this for a business, is there demand for those products wherever you happen to be, and where to sell them. And interestingly, Melissa, who is here with CWC, has another session tomorrow that is talking about the selling and the distribution of some of these produce products that is grown. I don't know if you want to give a quick
Yeah,
blurb
what
about
I'll be talking about tomorrow is what are the local food markets available right now and what CWC is helping to grow. So we're looking at doing more of a collaborative irrigation and distribution network for folks to not have to drive all the way to Casper or Lander to sell their product. They can put it on the bus, so to speak, and it'll be taken there with other folks' food products, which is an efficiency thing for people not having to spend their time and money driving all over the county to sell their
Sure.
food. And it's a way to expand your market beyond just, say, the Riverton Farmers Market or the Lander Farmers Market or the Shoshone one, and you don't have to drive. Like, for instance, Karina Lynch, drives to Lander once a week from Shoshone with milk. It's awesome. I can buy it. She comes to the Baumgart's parking lot at noon. But that takes quite a bit of hours of her time to do that, to sell her milk. And so by working together, we can eliminate some of that driving for people. So that's what I'll be talking about tomorrow.
Yeah, cool, thank you. All right, so I just want to kind of introduce what regenerative agriculture is, if anybody is unfamiliar with it. It's really building the organic matter in soil and feeding those microbes that are in that soil to create healthy soil instead of some of the practices of old that just are kind of extracting those nutrients from the soil and not really putting them back in unless it's with synthetic fertilizer, etc. So some of the benefits of regenerative agriculture, and we'll be talking about benefits throughout this whole you want to just set up shop right here? All right. Anyway, yeah, some of the benefits. We're increasing the organic matter and thereby providing some soil sequestration into the soil from the atmosphere. And we're keeping it in the soil as opposed to some practices of old that would let that carbon escape up into the atmosphere. And then really the benefit to the grower is that because you have healthy soil, you're going to have consistent nutrient-dense crop yields without relying on those synthetic additives, herbicides, pesticides, fertilizers, etc. So these are the 5 core principles of regenerative agriculture, and we'll talk more about most of these because we've been employing these at the farm plot at the ASI. But really minimizing soil disturbance, so no-till or minimal till practices. Maximizing crop diversity, planting more than just one single crop in an area. Keeping your soil covered is an important one, maintaining a living root year-round in that soil, and then integrating livestock. I think integrating livestock is the one thing we haven't super done up at the ASI yet, but I think some things are in the works, so that's one we're not gonna talk quite as much about. Just to kind of link this in with what we've been doing at the ASI farm plot, we have employed minimal tillage practices. We use cover crops and mulch, crop rotation, drip irrigation. We have created and used compost really as our main additive for nutrients into the soil. And then we have used some season extension tools. We have a hoop house. We just built a geodesic dome hoop greenhouse as well that really help those season extensions. And then we're gonna talk a little bit about some natural weed and pest control. And one big thing that I didn't talk about further, but is important here and is in this picture, is that we really incorporated a couple of rows of flowers into the mix growing of our food product to bring in the pollinators to pollinate all of our stuff that we're growing for food
Can I ask
purposes.
a question
Yeah.
about your cover crops? You know, there's been a lot of push to try to have farmers use cover crops.
Yeah.
But, so if you put a cover crop on, say I put something on in the fall, and in the spring it starts growing again, and then I go in and I can do minimum till,
Uh-huh.
but I, a lot of times then have to spray to kill the cover crop.
Yeah. So I
And so
mean,
we've kind of gone,
it can be kind of tricky, and even we had some tricky things with being able to kill it appropriately. But supposedly, if you mow it down low enough, it's gonna kill the rest of the plant so that it doesn't come back. And then the roots, you can keep the roots in there without having to re-till it and then plant around it. But yeah, I think there are.
Sticking with the annuals and making sure you mow them down before they go to seed, I think is really important.
Yep. Good question though.
And grazing can be used in place of mowing. You
Mhm.
can overgraze it, right, to
Sure.
really take it down close to the soil. I've done that with some cattle on my place, intentionally overstocked in a small area, and then that'll stop the growth, so there's not as much competition with the next one.
And their hooves will kind of beat it down into the soil, so it's putting that organic matter back down into the soil. So,
you use foul?
Yeah, actually.
we have. I don't know if
We
we've
got
used it much for,
chickens
but yeah,
a couple days
chickens.
ago, actually, in our farm plots.
We'll see how it goes.
They can do the same thing, because if you put chickens in a small area with a lot of them, they'll take it down to soil, yeah.
Well, then it's your bugs too,
Yeah.
right?
There you go.
Okay. Sorry.
And anything else that's growing nearby. So,
They're gonna eat the seeds too.
Yeah, they eat the seeds too.
all right.
That's true, so it wouldn't reseed, yeah.
So to talk about minimal tillage and fewer soil disturbances. The reason why this is important is because it maintains the soil structure and holds nutrients in there. I wouldn't say this is a new thought, but I think it's gaining some traction because people are recognizing that soil really has a lot of living substance in there, and all of those microbes in there are creating a healthy, viable soil that allows us not to have to put all those additives in. And so whenever we till the soil or any sort of heavy disturbance of that soil disrupts those microbes and maybe kills them, and so they're no longer doing their job, and then we've got kind of dead, non-functioning soil there. Again, it builds that soil organic matter, which those microbes feed on. It also prevents that carbon from escaping up into the atmosphere, so that's a positive result as well. And then it really just increases soil fertility, like I told you about, because of those microorganisms. A big one is reducing erosion. Anytime we till the soil, any wind that comes through is going to blow a good portion of that away. And then some other benefits are just reducing soil compaction, and it helps water retention. So we can water less and keep that water in there from evaporating quickly. And then another positive is it just reduces fuel and equipment costs. We're not having to pay for somebody to come, plow our soil or have the equipment ourselves to have to do that. All right, cover crops. Some of the benefits of cover crops, and a lot of these can be said about mulching too, but it really adds to the organic matter, which is creating the health in the soil. It decreases nutrient loss. It draws in beneficial insects. I've got a little video right after this to kind of show you how that happens. Reducing erosion again, positive water retention and infiltration down to the weeds. And it suppresses weeds too. Like if you've got your soil covered, there's nowhere for those weeds to come in and take root. So, and then one other thing about cover crops, we'll talk about this too, but it adds nitrogen. If you have a legume or a pea or a clover, you're actually feeding the soil because those are nitrogen fixing plants, and you're putting that nitrogen back into the soil as well. Green mulch is another option. You can see that we've planted kale here, and all of this stuff is clover that we planted underneath kind of the understory of those plants. And that clover is nitrogen fixing, so it's adding nutrients into the soil and it's suppressing weeds. And it just kind of happily living there in the understory under everything.
I think it also did a good job. Kale likes that cooler growing and
Kinda
not
kept-
having the soil
Yeah,
directly
radiating
exposed to
that
sun
heat.
during the summer.
Good point.
Kept our kale a bit cooler and
Yep.
more
Right.
flourished better.
It did flourish.
This is just a quick video of a row of cover crop that we had planted in the farm plot, virtually for the whole season, I think. But it's just, if you can listen closely, I don't know how the volume is on this, but there are just bees that are just having a heyday in there. Okay, never mind. Sorry, this is not our own personal computer, so it's given us a little wonkiness. And now I can't go to the next slide.
Maybe you can play it from that instead. Let's see.
Hmm? No, sorry.
Yeah, we got another one.
Trying to use a different computer than you're used to is worse than jumping in somebody's car trying to drive it. All right. Almost there. Okay. All right. Let's talk about crop rotation. Crop rotation is another important aspect of both specialty crop growing and if you're doing it with regenerative agriculture in mind. It breaks the disease, pest, and weed cycles. So for instance, potatoes and tomatoes sometimes tend to have diseases that are inherent to that family, and that plant of that year might have some of those diseases in it. It may not have killed the plant, may not have done much, but if we plant those same types of crops in that same area the next year, then they're going to be much more susceptible to taking on that disease, and it may be more detrimental that year. So if you move where you plant them, you're planting them in an area that hasn't been exposed to those diseases in the past, and you're planting another family of products into where that disease doesn't even matter. So if it happens to be there, they're not going to take it up. Another good reason for this is here's showing that we're gonna plant tomatoes and potatoes where we had legumes planted before. Same thing, those are nitrogen fixing plants, and so you're taking a heavy feeder such as a tomato and a potato, and you're moving them to where some of those nutrients have been restored because of those nitrogen fixing plants there. And same thing here, these are less heavy feeders or they're deeper feeders. So if you're planting them where these heavy feeders were, they've got different root lengths and they can reach they can access different areas of nutrients in that soil profile as well. So, and ultimately this is reducing the need for those chemical inputs that we're trying to avoid, pesticide, fertilizer, and herbicide. benefits. All right, drip irrigation. We live in an arid location, so access to water is tricky, and then even if we have access to water, we're gonna wanna minimize how much of that we use. So drip irrigation is a perfect way to do that. It hones in on where you want the water and it puts it there so that the roots can access it easily. It avoids evaporation of that water. It also prevents weeds from gaining access to that water because you've just got it in this area here, and weeds aren't getting it even though they might be able to grow, you know, in the rows. They're not having as much access to that water. Let's see, saves time and money. System is super efficient, easy to set up, easy to access these supplies as well. And then some of the other benefits here, just kind of, if you're flooding something with water, all of those nutrients are leaching down further into the soil and you're no longer able to access those. And then it's good, I don't know if you can see it here, but even our farm plot had some kind of wonky leveling issues, and it was no problem with the drip irrigation.
I think another interesting thing, when you're doing that drip instead of a spray or a flood, you're reducing the risk of getting animal contaminants like salmonella up on your leaves.
Or diseases too. I mean, like, there are some diseases that come in if you've got water that's just sitting on your leaves or your stems.
Or sunburn.
Yeah, yep. All right, just talking about composting. Really, I can't say it's the biggest benefit. There's a lot of benefits of it. But really, composting does reduce your need for any sort of synthetic fertilizer application, because you're taking all of that compost with all of those viable nutrients in it and mixing it in with your soil, and then those nutrients are there for that plant to access. But it also does some of the same things that all of these other practices have done. We're reducing erosion still. It's helping create a better soil structure. We have, up at the ASI, it's almost entirely clay soil, and so it tends to clump. The more and more compost that we continue adding in over the year, it's gonna make that, did you call it a beautiful loam? A beautiful loamy soil that not only has, you know, strong, good nutrients in there, but the plants will be happier with that soil structure. Yeah, and then again, if you're making your own compost, you're reducing waste in landfills, and you're just kind of reusing some of those things that you've had around the farm. We composted almost every plant that we yanked out after the fact, except for some of those ones that tend to have diseases, like the tomatoes and the potatoes. Anyway, so, and again, just from an environmental standpoint, it really does keep that carbon in the soil as opposed to letting that out up into the atmosphere. All right, so some ways to provide natural weed and pest control. Sorry, this picture isn't the best, but basically what this is fabric, thin water permeable fabric that's over these crops, and it can do a number of things. It can prevent death by frost if we've got too early or too late of a frost in the spring. But pest control is another big thing that this prevents eggs being laid down here, or it prevents flying insects from being able to access these plants. And especially when plants are young, they're more vulnerable. And so if you can keep those pests off of them long enough for them to be hardy and vibrant, then you can take that stuff off and those pests aren't going to ruin that plant or affect it as much. Weed barrier is another example of this. You can see too that we've mulched, like we tried not to have any bare soil so that no weeds could come in, and keeping that carbon sink in place. But if you lay down landscape fabric like this, it's going to help retain water better and really discourages weed. I mean, we obviously didn't have to touch weeding of those areas at all because it just blocks all life underneath it.
Lazy man's gold is that weed
Yeah, yeah. Don't think it's lazy. I think it's innovative.
Efficient.
There you go.
My friend says he has the garden and weeding at his house.
I think that ends up being the case at most places, sadly. But all right, do you want to take it away?
Oh, sure.
I don't know
I'll
if that
jump in
video
here.
will work, but
Yeah.
we've got a picture.
No,
of it.
probably not.
Douglas is just gonna kind of talk more about some of the tools that we can use. You don't have to make huge investments, but there are certain tools that he'll talk about that really help with efficiency and getting the job done.
Yeah, this guy, the Grillo, is a hand-driven tractor, essentially. It's got a PTO. Really, it's an awesome piece of equipment. It's compared to buying one of these monsters, which you don't need for growing vegetables for the most part, unless you're getting really big. This will do several acres each year in vegetable crop, which, if you're motivated enough to do several acres of vegetables, please give me your secret. But the PTO's neat. We've got the bed shaper for it.
We have a harrow,
The harrow.
and we just purchased
Wood
chipper
chipper,
shredder.
yeah.
But there's so many
There's,
implements.
oh my gosh,
You can bale hay
dozens.
with them.
Snow blow, right?
Cut
Snow
snow.
blower.
You can blow snow,
Yeah,
you
bale
can
hay.
sweep
Yeah.
snow, you can
We
run
get
a
little-
spinner on it.
Yeah, it's a little slother and then a little round baler.
It's got a mower.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
super versatile.
And for $5,000 plus whatever you pay for the attachments, it's not that expensive. Especially with specialty crops, you want to keep those
Yeah.
costs low, and this I think is the
Children and
perfect thing for minimizing costs, but still being able to get a lot of work done.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can't wait to do the wood chipper for
yeah.
the college is neat. We have all these old trees, so we're gonna shred and lay so much mulch this year. I can't wait to make the students run around and collect instead.
Do the wood chips
does
make
look
good?
like
We're trying to sell the program.
Yeah, the wood chips make
Not
really
off
good.
of pine, right? Is
Um,
pine still a
Yeah,
no-no
pine
for it?
can be a bit acidic. Sometimes in Wyoming, with our soils being so basic, pine isn't that bad because it adds a little bit more acidity. But I wouldn't put it directly around your plants. In my home market garden, I keep pine kind of in the walkways. The nice thing with wood chips is tree trimmers will dump an entire dump truck load for free in your yard if you want it. How's this change over?
Oh, I just used the arrow key because I couldn't get it to click.
Hoopos greenhouse. So this is our main hoop house, which is down more towards the central part of the campus. We used it for doing all of our starts. As you can see, we've got I think the cabbages and tomatoes up here, which we started in April. I think we tried to get some in March. They didn't do too well. We had that one cold burst.
Yeah,
Even though we do
We
have
have
a
a little-
heater in ours, which is really great. Hoop houses are neat right now. There's a lot of opportunity with the Department of Ag's specialty crop program to get grants and assistance in purchasing and building them. And as short as our growing season is, it's really worth looking into if you're gonna be growing a lot of stuff. Again, we use drip irrigation here. So it's easy. One thing you gotta keep in mind if you're doing your starts in a greenhouse or a hoop house like this is to bring them out when it starts getting warmer during the day. You wanna hardy them. Transplants need to feel that wind to stiffen up and form a strong stem. Otherwise, a lot of times when you're transplanting, if they've not experienced the full sun and when they'll just fall over, which we did a good job, I think, this year. Again, the wind, the snow, the frost. Another neat thing for plants that are a little more sensitive to the sun, the hoop houses can be nice because you can add a shade cloth over top of them and turn them into either a warm, hot shaded area, or I've actually got one at my property that I don't have the plastic on top. I just put shade cloths over and it converted into what they call a cool house for cooler crops, so I can grow cooler lettuces through the summer. All right, some of our cool tools. So one of the main things that are regenerative farmers, kind of a backbone, is this broad fork, which we don't have with us. But they're real neat. You can go in there in a no-till style and stick that in the ground, move it a bit, break up the soil, get a little bit of oxygen, add your compost so it gets down in there without really breaking up and killing all those mycelium networks or murdering your bacteria by throwing them on top of the soil from tilling. There's a lot of different hoe varieties. You've got your standard hoe, which I think everybody's seen. These half moon hoes are real nice. They're a real versatile Japanese style hoe. You can get in there and just murder a whole row, or fine tip, kill out thistle, which is what I use this one's for.
Thistle killer.
The thistle, man. Oh, that was our one main Indiana this year. And this is a stirrup hoe. These are real nice. You can get just right under the surface of the soil and skim at that root line. Really efficient, really handy if you catch the weeds when they're real young and they've got that wet, real fine, stringy root. These will just murder them.
Where do you get those at?
Some of the bigger hardware stores will have them. Johnny Seeds carries a lot of specialty hoes and stuff.
Down local?
It does break up the hard crust too, is what I
Yeah.
used to like it for, cause it was breaking that
Yeah.
top without going deep to.
Yeah, I know I've seen them at Baumgar's. I'm not sure if they're at Murdoch's.
I think they're pretty common. I think they're, yeah.
But yeah, these are handy. I've used these for hours and hours and hours each summer, and they're nice when you catch all those weeds early.
And you can sharpen them, so, I mean,
Yeah.
cause they
Oh,
lose
yeah.
their edge.
They'll
so
keep a nice sharp
keep them
edge
nice
if you
and sharp.
maintain them.
Do they get rid of goat heads?
Yeah, they're good for goat heads too. Yeah, they'll go right under that stem and. Oh, that's yours. I'll go over some of the other stuff we've got. Pass these around. These are a hand dibbler. They're good for planting transplants or bulbs, killing vampires if they're.
Yeah, there's some rage control difference that happen here.
Well, this is directed it towards weeds.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, I never say mean things when I'm weeding. Another fun tool we've got here. As you saw in that one picture with the Grillo, we typically do 3-foot rows when we're doing produce farming. It's just easier, I think, because you're doing a lot of bending over and picking and accessing the different plants. So this guy's real nice. It's about just shy of how wide you want your beds to be. This is a kind of a bed straightener, flattener. You can run this over. We need to this a few times with our wonderful clay soil because it gets all
Yeah.
bumpy. Seeding.
Did you bring the teeth for it?
No, but you could explain
No.
the,
Oh, yes,
the
there
metal
are.
dibblers.
There's also dibblers. You can attach to here and roll this back over the bed, and they're basically just spikes, and they'll leave holes in the ground so you can come back through and transplant or seed.
Yeah, then they're equally spaced.
Yeah. Anything for me, the older I get, the more I cannot, the more I don't have to bend over.
The less you have to bend down, the better. That's true. Yeah.
Seeding is also one thing you spend most of your time on. It's kind of a basic seeder, runs over. As it turns, it'll scoop up the seed and then drop it. So you've got a little more even spacing. Again, you're not bending over. And you can cover so much more ground.
And you can kind of calibrate that to seed size.
Yeah. You know what? Let's take a peek at that. This baby, oh, I can't wait to get this out. We had a plastic version of this last year, which I don't recommend in our soils. Light cedars don't do well in clay soil. But these guys are real fun. They've got the different discs. You can change the size of the seed that you're doing and the spacing that you want for it. And we just played with this guy. Watch me break it.
You would have to have your soil prepared ahead of that, right?
Yeah, this you want everything done first. This is your last step, drawing down that seed. Once your bed's all smooth and.
Does it close the row too behind it?
Yep, it has this little so it'll lay the seed down here, and then this guy will come back through
Cover them up.
and cover it back up.
Some of them have a chain that kind of followed back behind it that just kind of gives just a little cover of soil over all of those freshly laid seeds.
Right here, you can see this is that disc that's replaceable, so you can choose your size. That's all run off of these wheels. But these things are so handy. They saved us
Super efficient.
hours and
Yeah.
hours of time.
Do they do like down to carrot seeds and
Oh yeah, we
radish
did.
seeds and?
Yeah, we did carrots. We even did some lettuce.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked. It worked. It almost worked better with the smaller seeds, I would
Oh
say.
yeah.
But does work decently with larger ones as well.
What do they cost?
I don't know.
I think
That's a
they're a
recent-
couple of $100 for maybe one that's not as fancy as that one. That one I'm not sure, but I think we get a basic one for a couple $100.
Yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, if you're paying $300 for this, but you're growing an acre or two of vegetables, and you figure $15 an hour wage for what your time, this is gonna cut out, what, 20, 30 hours worth of work. So it pays itself off just by the labor cost. All right, we've gone into bed shaping and weeding and seeding. This guy,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
with a nice little razor blade. I'm
Yeah, it's
terrified
deadly.
of this.
That is death. That is a murder weapon.
I won't pass this around since the manual says like warning, don't lose fingers.
But yeah, they show their fingers.
This is a lettuce harvester. We were using that last year. Basically just hook up a cordless drill to it. This blade will rotate. These things will spin as it's cutting your lettuce, and throw it into this bag, and then you can just run through and dump it. So you're running it
I'll be done.
Yeah, you just run it off the top of your lettuce and you get your cuts and you dump them. Snazzy tool.
Yeah, it's very satisfying.
It is
Yeah, it is.
It's satisfying as long as you're not walking toe in the way.
Yeah.
It's one of the few tools I don't do barefoot in the garden. I love getting my feet in the mud. Caitlyn can attest to that.
That's true.
I'm the barefoot farmer. That's one thing I like about the specialty crops, the vegetable garden. You're not getting attacked by cows. You're not getting ran over by heavy equipment.
Yeah.
It's kind of easy, relaxing. Any questions about tools or?
I'd make a comment. I have a friend that does a raised bed, and he built a little thing with wooden dowels, like your little dowel pointer here, and he had multiples in rows, so he could go out and he'd go
Oh, yeah.
and make
Oh,
little
nice.
holes, and he could make them for the different depths that he wanted. Then you just put the seeds in.
Oh yeah,
And
there's,
it was kind of interesting to watch him do that. See how that
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, there's all sorts of interesting dibblers. We don't have any of the tall ones, but you can get ones that are stand-up style with a tube, so you can dibble, drop a bulb or seed, or move on. Those are handy too. We don't have those at the school yet. Any other questions?
I went from a great big garden that I didn't have problem, just gardened, and then I went into town and started raising, raised beds and tubs. Somehow along about half the year, they begin to not do good. What is the theory on what you feed them? Do you rotate the dirt? Do you leave your dirt alone in there like you're talking soil here and just add to it, or
I usually add on top.
you're not a pot grower?
I usually add on top. I've got basically, what do they call them? The claws. It's like a downward pointing hoe with claws that you can kind of just loosen them up a bit, and then I'll sprinkle compost, and I raise rabbits, so because rabbit manure is not very acidic, so you can direct apply it. You don't have to.
And you walk around
Age it.
barefooted?
Not through the rabbit poop.
Are they not doing well, like mid-season?
Oh, they do beautiful
Uh-huh,
halfway,
uh-huh.
and then the fruit
Raise-
that's
Are
on.
you adding any are you feeding them?
Well,
at
I
that
don't
time?
know, you're
Okay.
talking about not using.
Well, there are organic fertilizers that you can use that are safe, but you can also add additional compost just in kind of around the base of the plants, and that will act to feed them as well. Because especially once they start they use a lot of those nutrients to create the plant and the leaves themselves, and then by the time the fruit is ready to be produced, you almost do need to add a little bit more in there to be able to feed that fruit production.
One thing I've noticed here locally with raised beds, they're up above ground, so they're getting more airflow, and it's getting hit with the sun more in summer. They seem to dry out faster.
That's true.
But you can overwater them real
Yeah.
easy too.
Yeah, so-
Have
When,
you,
in my raised beds, I'm really picky with them. I'll always shove my finger down in there. You've got
test
to
it out.
test out.
Mulching on top, putting something on top of it, will keep that water in that pot a little bit better, or container a little bit better.
Yeah, if you don't put poisons on your lawn,
Well, what do you think
Your
of
grass.
of the, soil that says, will feed all year? Do you think
Like
those are?
Miracle Grow?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're synthetic
Yeah.
fertilizers, I don't
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
think they're
not
feeding all year? I wondered if that was wearing out, cause that's the soil.
Yeah, and they're not natural fertilizers either.
No, and they'll burn off
Made
in
in
the
a lab.
heat of summer too, so they'll do really good in the spring, and it seems like some of that synthetic stuff, I don't know if it just burns out, evaporates, or what, but it seems to.
One more question, where I have mine in my little patio, it gets a lot of sun and it gets really hot. Does that affect pots? Does it get hot all the way through and no
Yeah.
coolness for
Yeah, pots and raised beds, you're up above, so it's getting, unlike ground where it's just hitting the ground, you're up above now, so.
I
the
thought maybe
sun's
that was
hitting
what was
the top
slowing
of the
it
soil,
down, yeah.
it's heating the sides of your soil, so.
You could do a shade cloth. I've
Yes.
actually started shading most of my garden due to perhaps to high elevation. There's a lot of, for certain sensitive crops, there's too much sun for it. So you can
Well, it
purchase like,
definitely gets on.
they're called like
hot.
30% or 50% shade, and I live out where there's no tree protection, and I had like 60-mile-per-hour gusts, and I was a little worried about doing a shade cloth at first. I was like, yeah, it's gonna be in the next county, right?
Yeah.
But there's enough room for the wind to move through it, and I get it really low to the ground, like just low enough I could go under it, that I didn't have trouble with it billowing too much. And living in town, you shouldn't have as much wind.
Yeah.
So have you guys used, mushroom compost?
We pick some up at the end of the year. We put some leaves and I think some wood chips in it, and we're letting it sit over the winter. I've heard that it's really high in nitrogen, so it'll burn your plants. So we're trying to use those, giving it some time to cool off, and we added the more carbon from the leaves and wood chips to kind of suck up some of that nitrogen. But yeah, we'll be using that next year in our beds, so. Alright. Joanne, you wanna plug the
Yeah,
program?
I have some flyers for our beginning farmer training program. We're recruiting now for our 2022 cohort, which will start May 16th, and it'll run through October 7th. So if, I have these flyers here, if anybody would like to take one, if you know someone who would be interested, please share the information.
Yeah,
We mentioned before, we have full scholarships, so we'll cover all the participation costs this year. We have great field trips to the other farmers in the region. The students have said, two of our students from last year said it was one of the best parts of the learning experience was learning from other growers in different parts of our area. So,
Yeah, it's amazing how a lot of your specialty crop growers here are just so open. It's like they'll tell you all their secrets.
All their
yeah,
trade
they love sharing.
Because there's such a market.
Well, another question for you is the pollinators. I get blossoms and blossoms and blossoms, but then no cucumbers. Are wasp pollinators?
Yep, wasps.
Well, I got lots of wasps.
I have more wasps than bees, I think,
Uh-huh,
in my
I do.
place.
And there's a little teeny tiny bee. Are they pollinators? A little
I
bees?
think those are mason
Mason bees,
yeah.
yeah,
Huh.
native bees.
Well, I thought
Yeah.
that's maybe why all my blossom, boy, I can get the blossoms on there, but I get a lot of fruit, but not.
Cucumbers are weird. It seems like every other year they'll be really good or really bad.
Better get a Q-tip out.
There you go.
Uh-huh.
Get a what?
A Q-tip.
Do the work
No.
yourself.
Yeah. No.
You know, in China, in their apple orchards, they use so much chemical fertilizer in their apple orchards that they actually have crews of pollinators that go through.
With hand pollinating and everything.
They
Yeah.
do hands.
And you guys are also welcome to come up and look at any of these tools as well. All right, thanks you guys.
Thank you very much.